Sunday night, Monday morning. Of course, we're talking about Tony Messenger in this two-part series on the Metrolink story, where allegations of St. Louis County police officers loitering, covering up cameras for hours at a time, and not doing what they're supposed to be doing, sleeping while on duty, providing inaccurate information. Tony Messenger joins us now. We should say, Tony, just a little programming note, that the police, Gabe Crocker, is going to join us 9:10 to give his side of this story. But, Tony, thanks for joining us here on the Big 550 KTRS, Tony.
No problem. Good morning. Good to talk to you.
So these allegations go back 2014. Seems like it's an awful long time ago. Why are these coming out now and not dealt with 3-4 years ago?
You know, that's an important question, because they have definitely been festering. As you look through the records, there are emails back and forth going back years before John Belmar, going back between the city and Metro. There has been tension over how Metro is policed for a long time. And like everything in St. Louis, part of it is because there's multiple jurisdictions. There's Metro Public Safety, there's St. Clair County Sheriff, there's the St. Louis County Police, there's the City of St. Louis Police, and all of them are supposed to work together to keep Metro safe. I think what really is driving the information that I discovered coming forward now is that over the last several months, you've had an increase in violence, and there's been a lot of finger pointing. At one point, County Executive Steve Stinger said he was going to double the number of county police officers, and then shortly after he did that, he proclaimed success, said we've made it safer, crime is down, and then a few months later, crime went up again, and he pointed at John Nations and said, it's your fault, and you won't sign the police contract. And as I pointed out in today's Post-Dispatch, and you can find it online at stltoday.com in part 3 of my series, the reality is that the county was trying to take all accountability out of the police contract, so the taxpayers had no ability to track the money, and Metro had no ability to be able to say to its auditors, here's how many police officers we were actually paying for, and here's what they were actually doing. The reality right now is there is no way for taxpayers or Metro to be able to say this is what's actually going on in terms of public safety. Here's the public records that show us there are X number of county police officers working this route and that platform. And that's just not good for public safety. Something has to be done so that the various people in law enforcement are working together, and right now they clearly are not.
So that's an interesting point, because the pictures, the video, police officers sleeping on the job, covering up a camera for 3-4 hours, anecdotal for the overall picture, and those who should be suspended or ripped for 10 days or whatever, right? I mean, that's one issue, but it seems like there's a proxy war going on between Bi-State, Vince Schamel, and St. Louis County, Belmar, and Stanger, and everybody else.
You know, there's all sorts of politics in the background, but here's what ultimately needs to matter. If all of those politicians care about public safety, they need to care that everybody's at the table being treated respectfully and working towards the same goal. Because right now, that's not what happened. Look at, for instance, Chief Belmar's comments yesterday about the camera. Yesterday, he says, well, a third party should not be recording our officers. That third party is Police Chief Richard Zott, who was also a cop, who was also had tremendous experience in law enforcement, and who put the camera in the police substation after a county police officer beat a victim, and County Internal Affairs wrote the chief and said, hey, do you have video? It would help us in our investigation. And he said, no, we don't have video in that office. But you know what? We'll take care of it. And now they do. These are professional law enforcement people. And when you read the emails, the county does not treat the Metro public safety people who are certified by the same state Department of Public Safety folks that certify them. They don't treat them as police officers. They don't treat them as law enforcement officers or professionals. They treat them as third parties or whatever they're referring to that time. That's not how you work together to create a greater, safer transit system. And ultimately, that's what this is about. One of the reasons that this story interested me and that I got on it is because I've been writing a lot about two big issues that are connected. One, the expansion of transit in St. Louis, which I believe is very important for the future of our economy. And two, the need for more regional cooperation and consolidation in government. And this story fits into both of those things. If we don't find a way to cooperate regionally and get beyond all of our different fiefdoms and little political battles over who's got, the bigger stick, who's more powerful, then we can't solve little problems, and then we can't get to the big problems or the big, opportunities such as expanding transit.
Who's this Zott guy? This Zott guy came on the scene. Isn't he a bi-state guy?
He is a bi-state guy. He is the chief of Metro Public Safety. He is a retired federal agent with 20, 30, 40 years in law enforcement. This is part of the problem. Here's a guy who's got tremendous professional background who is being left out of a lot of the discussions about what to do with safety. So basically you have a situation where Belmar and Stinger get together and say, we want to take over, we want to have more control of the system. We don't want to have a police contract where the Metro guys, who traditionally that's who is in charge of the police contract, we don't want them to know what our guys are doing. So we're going to take the power away. And in the meantime, you have Prosecutor Bob McCullough threatening the law enforcement officers at Metro with going to jail if they write fare evasion tickets in the county. So while you have Stinger and Belmar trying to take over the system, they're also taking the police officers who work for Metro and saying, you guys can't do your job. Well, no wonder crime went up.
Right,
no wonder there is a crime problem.
But the way you're explaining this story, because people need to understand the actual facts of the story, but then the broader implication. It seems like this, again, is a proxy war between Metro, Bi-State, Vince Shamel, the Zott guy, and it's over who controls the safety, the guards, the police of Metrolink. And now Belmar's floating this idea that the only reason why Bi-State's making such a big deal out of this is because they want their own police department for the Metrolink. Do you buy that? Is that any truth to that, or is that spin?
I think that's part of the story. See, here's the thing. I think people who want to call it a proxy war don't want to focus on the reality of the story. The reality of the story is we have an unsafe system, and hardly anybody disagrees with that. We have a system in which the various police officers aren't cooperating, and hardly anybody disagrees with that. We have a system where the evidence in my reporting pretty clearly shows that county police officers have not been on the platform and on the trains to the effect that they should be. And so what are we going to do to fix that system? What are we going to do to actually improve safety? That's the story. And there are loads and loads of emails back and forth within the records that I obtained about people talking about what are we going to do to fix the problem. To me, that's the story. And that's what we should be looking at. If we want to look at a proxy war and say, well, this guy's view doesn't matter because he's standing up for this politician, or this person's view doesn't matter because they're fighting a proxy war for this police chief or this politician. That's how nothing gets done in St. Louis. The same thing's happening with the workhouse right now. The question about the workhouse isn't whether or not we're solving crime in St. Louis or treating people accused of crime compassionately. It's whether or not this is about Tashara Jones or Lyda Cruzen. And that's how everything gets taken down in St. Louis and how we don't actually make progress because we fail to focus on the real problem. The real problem here, as identified in my work over the last few days, is that there's a safety problem on MetroLink and that at least one of the police agencies, St. Louis County, isn't living up to its accountability to taxpayers and isn't cooperating with the company, the group, Metro, by state, that has the contract with them for policing. And taxpayers ought to want that sort of accountability so that a year from now we can say X number of police officers made X number of calls and X number of arrests, and they worked with the city and they worked with St. Clair and they worked with Metro, and everybody worked towards the same goal.
Tony,
that's what this is about.
Tony, we'll leave the workhouse to another segment. Let's stay on Metrolink here for a second, because this police force idea, assuming facts that the St. Louis County Police failed at their job, failed miserably at protecting Metrolink, in a city and a community that already has way too many police departments. Do we really want to create another police force in a community that already has too many police forces?
Not necessarily, but what we want to do is we want to figure out what's the best solution. What is actually going to make Metrolink safe? So is it that the county takes everything over? Is it that the city takes everything over? Does St. Clair need to take over? Do we continue to have 4 police forces working the system, which is ultimately what we have now?
Yeah.
Like it or not, Metro has a public safety department with licensed law enforcement personnel. So whether you want to call it their own police force or not, ultimately they have something that resembles their own police force. And then they also have below that security guards that are licensed security folks. So what is it that we want? What is it that the best cities with the safest transit are doing across the country? Ultimately, that is the question that has to be answered, and what will provide the most public safety and the most bang for the taxpayer dollars. So is it a Metro Public Safety Force? I don't know. Is it St. Louis County? I don't know. I'm fine with St. Louis County taking over if there's public accountability.
Yeah. All these allegations are the county police, right? None in the city, right? So they're saying the city.
There are some in the city, but the records that I looked at overwhelmingly were about disputes between the county more so than the city, in part because there are so many more county officers working the system than either city or St. Clair.
Got it. Tony Messenger, we'll leave it there. Everything is online, STLtoday.com. We'll talk to you Thursday. Have a good week, Tony.
Good to talk to you. Thanks.
8:29.